A great terror was born in the dense jungles of Nepal, near the mighty Himalayan mountains. It did not come in the form of an earthquake or a flood, but on 4 silent paws. A magnificent Bengal tigress, for reasons unknown at the time, had turned her attention from the deer and the boar to a new kind of prey, man. Her first victim was a local villager, taken while gathering firewood. Soon another disappeared, and then another. The attacks were sudden, brutal, and left little trace behind, save for the chilling silence that followed. The people of the Rupal village, and then others nearby, began to live in a state of constant, gnawing fear. The fear was a palpable thing, a heavy blanket that smothered the life out of the once vibrant communities. People stopped venturing into the forest, their primary source for food, fuel, and fodder. They barricaded their doors at dusk and spoke only in hushed whispers, as if the very sound of their voices might attract the beast. The tigress was clever, a ghost in the jungle. She learned the habits of humans, their routines, and their vulnerabilities. She would wait patiently along familiar paths or near water sources, striking with a terrifying and deadly precision that seemed almost supernatural to the frightened villagers who were her victims. The Nepalese government, alarmed by the rising death toll, decided that action must be taken. They sent soldiers, experienced hunters armed with modern rifles, to put an end to the menace. These men were brave and skilled, but the jungle was the tigress's domain. She outsmarted them at every turn, melting into the undergrowth like a phantom. The hunters found her tracks. They heard stories of her presence, but they could never get a clear shot. The tigress seemed to possess an uncanny intelligence, always staying one step ahead of her pursuers, leaving them frustrated and empty-handed while her list of victims continued to grow longer. After years of failed attempts, and with the number of dead exceeding 200, the Nepalese army took a drastic step. They decided not to kill the tigress but to drive her away. In a massive effort, hundreds of soldiers and villagers formed a long, noisy line, beating drums and firing shots into the air. They pushed forward, creating a wall of sound that forced the tigress to retreat. She was driven eastward, away from the villages she had terrorized for so long. She crossed the Sarda River, leaving the territory of Nepal behind and entering the Kumaon division of British India, a new land with new people to hunt. The tigress's arrival in the Kumaon region was not immediately known, but her presence was soon felt in the most horrifying way possible. The killings began anew, starting in a village near the border. The pattern was the same. A person would venture out alone, to work in the fields or to collect water, and would simply vanish. The terror that had gripped Nepal now found a new home in India. The people of Kumaon, who had lived alongside tigers for generations, had never experienced anything like this. This was not a normal tiger, this was a demon, a man-eater of unparalleled cunning and ferocity that hunted humans not by chance but by deliberate choice. Life in the Kumaon hills ground to a halt. The fear was so intense that men were afraid to leave their huts to go to work. The sound of a snapping twig or a rustle in the bushes would send people running for their lives. The tigress grew bolder with each successful hunt. She started attacking in broad daylight, dragging victims from the very outskirts of their villages. The roads connecting the towns became deserted, as postmen and travelers refused to use them. The entire district of Champawat, a beautiful land of hills and valleys, was held hostage by a single 400-pound animal that had declared war on humanity. The British government, which ruled India at the time, could not ignore the crisis. The administration of an entire region was collapsing because of one animal. They posted handsome rewards for anyone who could kill the tigress, attracting sportsmen and hunters from all over the country. These men arrived with their fine elephants and powerful rifles, confident in their abilities. Yet, one by one, they failed. The tigress was too elusive, too intelligent. She would disappear for weeks, only to reappear in a different area, miles away, to claim another victim. The jungle was her ally, and she used it to her full advantage against all who came for her. The death toll continued to climb, eventually reaching an official count of 436 people, though the true number was likely much higher. The government even sent in Gurkha soldiers, renowned for their bravery and tracking skills. But they too were unsuccessful. The people were desperate, their prayers unanswered, and their protectors helpless. They felt abandoned, living each day with the knowledge that it could be their last. The Man-Eater of Champawat was no longer just a tiger. She was a legend, a malevolent spirit of the forest whose reign of terror seemed to have no end in sight. With all other options exhausted, and the people of Kumaon living in a state of utter panic, the government turned to one last hope. They sent a message to a man named Jim Corbett. I was, at that time, a man who had spent his life in the jungles of India, understanding the ways of its creatures. I had earned a reputation for hunting man-eaters, not for sport, but to help people in need. The request from the government was a plea: come to Champawat and rid them of the tigress that had turned their lives into a nightmare. I knew the danger involved, but the thought of the suffering villagers compelled me to accept the challenge. Upon my arrival in the Kumaon region in 1907, the atmosphere of fear was thicker than the jungle mist. The local officials told me stories that made my blood run cold. They spoke of the tigress's audacity, how she would stalk the edges of villages in broad daylight, her roars echoing through the valleys at night, a sound that promised death. I began my hunt by gathering information, speaking to the villagers, and studying the locations of the previous attacks. I needed to understand the animal's habits, her territory, and her methods. This was not just a hunt, it was a chess match against a brilliant and deadly opponent. The turning point came with the tigress's final kill. She attacked a young girl, only 16 years of age, who had gone into the forest to cut grass for her family's cattle. The villagers, though terrified, were brave. They followed the trail of blood and managed to scare the tigress away from her victim's body. But it was too late for the poor girl. This tragic event gave me a crucial advantage. The tigress had been interrupted and would surely return to her kill. I knew this was my best, and perhaps only, chance to finally face her. I would have to use the girl's body as bait, a grim task that weighed heavily on my soul. I made my way to the spot where the girl's body lay, a small clearing near a stream. The villagers, led by the local Tahsildar, a government official, agreed to help me organize a beat. The plan was to have a large group of men make noise and advance through the jungle, hoping to drive the tigress towards my position. I found a suitable spot to wait, my senses on high alert. Every rustle of leaves, every bird call could signal her approach. The sun began to set, casting long shadows through the trees. The air grew still and silent. I knew the man-eater was close, and that one of us would not survive the coming encounter. As the beaters began their noisy advance, the jungle erupted in a cacophony of shouts and drumbeats. The sound echoed through the gorge, designed to flush any animal out of hiding. I remained perfectly still, my rifle ready, my eyes scanning the dense undergrowth for any sign of movement. Suddenly, a flash of orange and black appeared. It was her, the Champawat tigress. She was not running in panic but moving with a controlled, angry purpose. She was magnificent and terrifying all at once. She paused for a moment, and in that instant, I took my first shot. The bullet struck her, but it was not a fatal blow. Wounded and enraged, she disappeared back into the thicket. The hunt was not over. It had just become infinitely more dangerous. A wounded tiger is the most formidable adversary one can face in the jungle. I had to follow her trail of blood into the dense lantana bushes, where visibility was limited to only a few feet. Every step was fraught with peril, as she could be lying in wait anywhere, ready to launch a final desperate attack. With the Tahsildar bravely by my side, I tracked her for what felt like an eternity. We finally cornered her in a small ravine. She charged, roaring with fury, and in those last heart-stopping seconds, I fired my rifle. The great Man-Eater of Champawat fell, and the long reign of terror was finally over. The news of the tigress's death spread like wildfire. The villagers, who had lived in fear for so long, emerged from their homes, their relief and gratitude overwhelming. They treated me not as a hunter, but as a liberator, a sadhu or holy man sent to deliver them from evil. In the days that followed, I performed an examination of the tigress's body to understand why she had become a man-eater. The answer lay in her mouth. The canine teeth on the right side of her jaw were broken, one in half and the other right down to the bone. The old injury, likely from a gunshot, must have caused her immense pain and made it impossible for her to hunt her natural prey. With the man-eater gone, life in Kumaon slowly returned to normal. The roads reopened, the fields were tended once more, and the laughter of children replaced the silence of fear. The story of the hunt made me a hero throughout India, a title I never sought. My true reward was seeing the peace restored to the people of the hills. The tale of the Champawat tigress became a legend, a sobering reminder of the thin line that separates the world of man from the world of the wild, and of the desperate measures an animal will take when injured and unable to live the life nature intended for it.